Welcome. This is the podcast of Care Austria with Andrea Barschdorf-Hager.
Welcome to our Care in Action podcast. Another episode out of the launch of the Museum of Applied Arts in Vienna. And my guest today is a Nigerian artist. He specialized in artificial intelligence. He is an innovator and his name is Jibril Baba. Welcome to Vienna, Jibril. Very nice meeting you.
Yeah, thank you.
And your work merges traditional food and water storage practices with modern artificial intelligence technology, which is something really interesting we will talk about. So I read in the preparation for this podcast that you're an architect.
Yes.
And when you were a boy, Jibril, did you plan to become an architect? And why?
So growing up, I always had tendencies towards arts. But in Nigeria, and certainly when I was growing up, art wasn't recognized as a professional career. So based on
what did you do? You painted or what?
Yeah, I used to draw. I used to paint with crayons and poster colors and but based on the influence of my dad and in conjunction with some of my teachers, they kind of tailored my ideas towards architecture, which is more, it has more reputation in Nigeria. So I remember having a magazine, my dad buying a magazine for me, and I saw the buildings of Frank Lloyd Wright, and then I started drawing buildings. And so from there, it was just architecture. It was arts, creativity was arts, but...
So you merged it, your creativity.
So I improved it into architecture because it wasn't really valued. So architecture was what people kind of understood more. So.
And where did you grow up in Nigeria?
I grew up in Lagos.
In Lagos. So this is an enormous big city.
Yes.
And you had a lot of inspiration.
Yes.
For an architect, right?
Yes, lots of inspiration. There's also a lot of influence from Portuguese architecture in Lagos. So we see brutalism and big buildings. So that shapes the architecture there, and So for me, it was first art, and then because architecture was more recognized, I moved towards architecture, and then...
And you studied architecture in Lagos?
No, I studied architecture in Akure. It's Ondo State. It's a different part of Nigeria.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you finished, then you started working as an architect?
Yes, then I started working as an architect. I worked independently for a while. Then I worked in a real estate firm. For us in Lagos and also in Nigeria, as an architect, you really can't be independent. You have to work in real estate firms because that's where they need architects the most.
That's where the big projects are done,
big
right?
Projects, yes, big projects. And also housing projects, real estate firms handle that. So I worked there for a while before I became dissatisfied.
And where did this dissatisfaction stem from, if I may ask?
The architecture in Nigeria is very objective and rigid, especially in the real estate context. A lot of the buildings look the same. So we're
but
working...
very modern, isn't it?
Yes,
I never was in Nigeria. I only looked over the frontier from another country.
Yeah.
But the pictures that I know, Lagos looks like a very modern city.
But we work with something like a template. A lot of the buildings, they are modern, but they tend to look alike. And for me, there is a full traditional architecture, historical architecture of Nigeria that was happening before colonialism. So I was very interested in that. And if you work in a real estate company, you are not allowed to express that kind of idea. All you're doing is the modern type of architecture. So for me, it was difficult to fit in because of working on a template, and I wanted to work out of that template. I wanted to explore the ideas of the past. And so after just under a year, I left the firm with absolutely no direction of what I wanted to do. And then I started painting.
So you are very interested in the traditional Nigerian history?
Yes, I am.
Pre-colonial history.
Yes.
And then you discovered that artificial intelligence and these machine learning tools might be tools to merge all your interests and to create something completely new.
So I honestly had no idea about it. I knew artificial intelligence and machine learning, but until I came across the Starts for Africa residency, the open call, that was when I saw that they wanted art thinking infused into technology. And for the first time,
I
began to explore that idea. And at first it was incomprehensible, but then I began to check out more modern technology, how it's in automation, algorithms, and then it just made a lot of sense, because sometimes art starts like an hypothesis. You usually don't have a direction, but with technology, I think the starting point begins as a truth, and then you can build on something that is tangible.
So it's a sort of prize, the art to be artist in residence is something that you won from the Starts Prize initiative. Just for our appreciative listeners, the Starts Prize was created originally by the European Commission, and it's science, technology, and art prize. And this should enable innovators, artists, and people like Jibril to develop their ideas further. So with this being an artist in residence, and it's interesting because is it your first artist in residence that you're doing?
Yes, my first artist in residence.
And you're doing it in the Gallery of Code, which was founded by Oscar Pomino.
Yes.
And we have already produced an episode with him. So you got the idea of merging your ideas of interest of the ancient Nigeria with artificial intelligence and machine learning at the Gallery of Code?
No.
Okay.
I got the idea and applied for the open call for the Starts for Africa residency. So the platform of Starts for Africa offers artists, technologists, and science to merge the work. So on the Starts for Africa platform, we had to work with residency hosts. So Gallery of Code was my residency host because I needed a place to express my ideas in technology and in science. So
did you know Oscar before? Or
no, I had no. We met
out of this Starts Prize. It all started.
Yes, he was part of the jurors who critiqued a lot of the work, and then he chose mine.
And this deep interest for Nigerian heritage and tradition, you're a very young man. Where does it come from?
I'd say it comes from my mother. Growing up, we used to sit under the moonlight, and she used to tell us stories of intertribal wars. Lots of the intertribal wars happened before colonialism. So there was a reality of
kingdoms.
Yeah, there were kingdoms.
Mighty
kingdoms. There was a reality, and there was a certain type of living, certain type of dreaming. And so for us as kids, because we were already exposed to Western ideologies, growing up, that's in school, that's what we were taught, Western ideologies. So going back home and listening to these stories from my mom, it felt like folk tales. And so I used to look forward to spending the time at night under the moonlight with her, because the stories just were different from a lot of things we learned. So for me, that shaped my artistic vision, and a lot of the things I express creatively is from those stories that
and it also stipulated your creativity, right?
Yes.
I mean, listening to.
Yeah, exactly.
So the school system, more or less, and Austria was not a colonial country, but in school, also here, you learn more the modern necessities of life and the modern technologies and everything. But at home, we get more the heritage part, the cultural part, to a certain extent. And so you got that at home.
Exactly.
And this is where the interest now comes from.
Exactly. This is where the interest comes from, and a lot of my creativity stems from that, because the ancestry, from where I'm from, I'm Igala, and that's a tribe in Nigeria. It's a small minority tribe, but our history in the past, in the kingdoms, we used to appear in certain kingdoms, and then we would make arts and just leave them, and then disappear from the kingdoms. And so people would wake up in the morning and see art and have no idea who had created them. So we used to move around the kingdoms. That was our history. So I feel that is part of my DNA, something that we've not been known historically to do.
Of sharing
our arts,
and moving around.
And it used to have profound impact on the people. Sometimes there were stories of people who had illnesses, and when they look at the art, they just get healed, and the people had no idea who had created them. Yeah.
An art piece in ancient Nigeria, I'm not a specialist for that, but I have some ideas about it, becomes art in a certain cultural context, right?
Yeah.
So what might be art in this museum here might not be regarded as art in any society in Nigeria, let's say. Yeah?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or any ethnic group.
Yeah.
So the context is the creator of art, because you mentioned something very interesting, that people looked at an art piece and they got healed.
Yes.
Tell us more about it.
Yeah, so there's a very spiritual aspect of art. So there's a spirituality about it. Not everyone could or had the ability to make art. So if you were back then, especially in the historical Nigeria, if you could make something, it could be wood, it could be through wood, it could be through stone, there are different mediums really, but just creating something that people had never seen before was very spiritual, and the people believed that it was from God. God gave you the ability, or opened your mind to do this. So just through the belief system, it had lots of profound effects on the people, and
I mean, this concept that God provides some excellence to a human being that can create things that were never seen or heard before, this is not far away from what we believed traditionally when people composed music for eternity. You have seen it maybe at Ars Electronica. Anton Bruckner, this famous composer, until today, he's really
still relevant,
very relevant and excellent, and he has sort of this divine spark.
Yes.
So this concept is not new in artists. This is a global concept, I would say. Having heard you talking about the tablets that you used to create modern architecture in Lagos, and then hearing you talk about your historical aspirations, would you say that digital art creates a sort of revival of this cultural heritage?
Yeah, I think so. That's pretty much what the project is about. So just taking the collective dreaming of the past and then using, because technology has, for me, the little downside, aside from the fact that it can be perceived as rigid or objective, but with art we can maybe make it more celebrated, which is why the intersection of arts and technology is very perfect for the future. So I think technology can improve on the things that we had in the past, and so that's the idea for me, basically.
And it can also help revitalize art from the past. It can also share it much easier in a global way than it was possible before, right?
Yes, definitely. Because technology has this ability to replicate very fast and easily. So yeah, that's something we did not have in the historical or local context. So yes.
Even 20 years ago, we didn't have it. So this is really a recent development,
yes,
right?
Definitely.
And what about the social aspect of your residency? Is there a social aspect in that, or is it purely artistic?
So the artistic vision is very rooted in the social aspect. So I wanted to take the sensitivity and imagination of the cultural population of the people who live there.
And then the recall.
Yes.
The recall project.
Yes, recall.
Spirit of the
old. So I wanted the sensitivity, the imagination of the people to be the foundation of the work, and then technology just as the catalyst to give it new possibilities. So the artistic idea is pretty much very cultural, and that's what the project is about, taking the practices from the past and then using technology as catalyst.
But taking also the agricultural practices of the past?
Yes, the agricultural practices of the past, and that's where it started from, because at the open call we were tasked to create a new reality for food and water. without having to know what is existing or what was in the past. So for me, taking what was in the past, which is how they stored the food, we focused on yams because yams are
staple food, right?
Staple food
in the
most
northeastern part
yes,
of Nigeria, especially.
Yes. So we focused on yams and looked at how they stored.
Yams is a root, right? It's a root.
Yes.
It's a root, not like potato, but a little bit.
Yeah, bigger, a little bit bigger.
It's big, it's white.
Yes.
You have to process it in special ways that you're able to eat it, and it grows quite easily, as far as I know,
yes,
right?
It grows easily, but it's an annual crop, so it grows easily, but a single heap can produce about 100 yams, so it can grow very fast and a lot of. So for the farmers, this is what typically they do. They grow this fruit, but the traditional way of storing is getting obsolete because a large part of the harvest, over 30% based on our research, is lost post-harvest because of there's very little storage practices, or the storage practices that exist now is not
outdated, right? Yeah.
So currently they use straws, so they put the yams on the ground, elevate them a bit from the ground just because of humidity, and then they use straws to cover the yams, and so that just prevents the UV rays. Because typically the sun, the heat is what affects the yams the most. Yam has a lot of water content, so when there is a lot of heat, it is evaporated and shrinks.
Dries out.
Yes, and it spoils. So they use these straws to cover it, and that's how they've been living, and that's what they've known all their lives. And some parts, the ones that even have a little bit of affluence, the farmers that are rich are able to store it in barns. So barns are even very, they're not popular because it's even expensive to have a barn. So the most popular one was just to put them on the ground and use these straws to cover them.
But then you had a huge amount of loss, of course.
Yeah, and then you have huge amounts of loss, and then rodents and insects can easily get them, and once it starts to spoil, it takes very little time, and then the yam shrink. So we wanted to assess that, the current experience, and then to see how we can use technology to, improve on that system and create something more resilient for the future.
And that's the core part of your work, right?
Yes, that's the core part of the work.
Which is really also very interesting for a large INGO like CARE is, because we are fighting poverty, if you want to phrase it in one sentence. And in many contexts, smallhold farmers are producing not much more than they need for their own survival, so subsistence farmers, they are called. And the biggest problem, believe it or not, in many contexts is the storage. Because even if they have a good harvest, the technology of the ancient methods of storing create enormous loss. So creating something using traditional knowledge, yes, but spice it up with today's technology is something really fascinating that might help millions of people globally, not only in African countries. In many places, storage is one of the big problems. Yeah,
that's pretty much the idea of the project. Yeah,
super. So we heard today another really interesting story again from Nigeria, a young scientist and artist that merges technology, science, and his aspiration for the traditional Nigerian culture. Thank you, Jibril, for being my guest.
Thank you very much.
And I hope that you have a wonderful time in Vienna.
Yeah, I will. Thank you so much. I'm very privileged to be here.
Thanks for listening. This was Care in Action, the podcast of Care Austria with Andrea Barschdorf-Hager. For further information, go to care.at. Sponsored by CC Real.